Good morning. This month we've been on a journey, not just a walk, but a sacred pilgrimage across the pathways of transcendence. Each week we've slipped beyond the surface noise of the world and closer to the depths of spirit, from the fog of confusion to the clarity of divine awareness. To transcend is to lift ourselves, not away from the world, but into the deeper reality of it. To transcend is to remember who we truly are. Not who we've been told we are, not who the world tells us we are, but the radiant, infinite presence of God expressing uniquely as us. Ernest Holmes said, "To him who can perfectly practice in action, all things are possible." That's transcendence. The spiritual inaction of ego, the surrender of false identity, the letting go of small stories, and in that stillness, discovering the allness of God. It's not about escaping the human condition, but it's about elevating it, infusing it with meaning, with light, and with grace. Now, we started the month with the pathway of power, where Reverend Debbie reminded us of the divine authority moving through each of us. Then Reverend Joanne cleared the pathway of clarity, invoking Ganesh to remove not just the obstacles in our path, but the obstacles in our mind. And last week we laughed with the enlightenment with Reverend Debbie, her playful and profound reminder to lighten up. And this week we step gently toward the pathway of grace. Recognizing grace in your life is important because it shifts your consciousness from striving to receiving, from scarcity to abundance, from self-reliance to trust in a greater source. It opens the heart and transforms your spiritual journey in profound ways. And here's why recognizing grace matters. First off, it deepens gratitude. When you notice grace, those unexpected blessings, moments of relief, or quiet serendipitous, you naturally move into a state of thankfulness. And gratitude, as we teach in Science of Mind, is a powerful attractor. It expands your awareness of good and draws more good into your life. Next, it connects you with the divine. Grace reminds us that we are not doing this alone. There is a loving presence, a higher intelligence moving through us and around us. Recognizing grace is like tuning in the radio dial of your mind to the frequency of the infinite. You hear Spirit whispering, "I'm here, I've got you." It also softens control and builds trust. So often we try to examine everything, fix everything, or push through challenges with sheer effort. But grace shows us that sometimes things fall into place. Not because we forced them, but because something greater is working for our good. Recognizing this softens the ego's grip and invites us to trust in the unfolding. It opens the heart to compassion. When you recognize that you've been graced with second chances, undeserved kindness, or single daily mercies, you will then become more willing to extend saving grace to others. You stop keeping score, and you start living from love. It also awakens you to the sacred in the ordinary. When you recognize grace, the mundane becomes miraculous. A sunrise becomes a love letter. A smile becomes a signpost. Life itself becomes a holy dance, not a burdensome march. It also aligns you with your spiritual truth. Science of Mind teaches us that we live in a spiritual universe governed by love and law. Grace is love in action, while overriding what we think we deserve with what the infinite knows we are ready to receive. When you recognize grace, you align with the truth that you are already worthy, already whole, and already held. In short, recognizing grace is not about being passive, it's about becoming more receptive. It's the active spiritual practice that opens the door for even more good to flow. So let's talk about recognizing grace. Grace, you may recall, shows up in many forms. Well, do you recognize this grace? That's Grace Kelly. Poised, elegant, almost otherworldly. And how about this grace? That's Grace Adler from Will and Grace. Loud, dramatic, and wildly human. And what about this one? That's Grace Slick. Rock rebel, truth teller, and a voice that once told us, "You are the crown of creation." So grace can be regal, ridiculous, rebellious, and yet, in the spiritual sense, grace is none of those and all of those. Grace is the divine yes that overrides your self-imposed no. It is the unearned, unmerited, unconditional love that doesn't wait for you to be perfect. It just is. Grace lifts us when we cannot lift ourselves. It bridges the gap between your humanness and your divinity. Grace is God's way of saying, even here, even now, you are loved. So Dennis Merritt Jones said it this way: grace is the presence of God's infinite love at the point of your greatest need. I need to repeat that because I think that is a great way to take a look at it. Grace is the presence of God's infinite love at the point of your greatest need. Grace doesn't check your credentials. It doesn't audit your karma. It simply says, you belong, you're loved, I am here. Grace doesn't follow logic. It follows love. And here's the miracle. Grace isn't rare. It's everywhere. But to receive it, we must recognize it. As Ramakrishna said poetically, the winds of grace are always blowing, but you have to raise your sail. So let's talk about recognizing grace, because grace comes in both major and minor keys. You've had those moments, some major, and some so subtle, you almost missed them. The major ones. You lose a job you thought you wanted, but a door opens to something far better a month later. A relationship ends, but you find yourself again. A near miss, a car accident avoided, a diagnosis reversed, a mistake that didn't break you, but awakened you. Or when you finally forgive someone, not because they earned it, because you're done suffering. Those are the dramatic symphonies of grace. But just as powerful, and sometimes more so, are the quiet ones. The quiet solos. You miss your exit and discover a peaceful park you didn't know existed. Someone pays for your coffee on a day when you felt invisible. You catch your breath at a sunset you almost didn't notice. Your pet curling up beside you, sensing your sadness, even when you haven't said a word. There are also subtle moments of grace. The gentle nudge of intuition telling you to turn left instead of right, and you avoid a mess or find something better. The right words come to you in a difficult conversation when you didn't know what you were going to say. Or a child's laughter breaks through your stress like the sunshine through the clouds. These small graces are not small. They are how spirit whispers, I am here. As we mentioned before, Emma Curtis Hopkins reminds us that there is good for me, and I ought to have it. Well, that's not arrogance, it's alignment. It's not ego speaking, it's truth realizing itself. There is grace for you, and you ought to see it. And when you begin to expect grace, not demand it, but expect it as a natural part of life, it flows even more freely. Grace is not wishful thinking. It is spiritual awareness. It's learning to live in harmony with the fundamental truth of the universe, that love wants to give itself through you. Holmes put it this way: grace is not something God imposes upon us, but it is a logical result of correct acceptance of life and a correct relationship with spirit. It's not forced, it's allowed. It's tuned into. Like light through a window, it's always there. The question is, have you opened up your blinds? Now, in Science of Mind, we talk a lot about the law. As you think, so it's done. What you focus on expands, and what you affirm becomes, and that is truth. But here's the divine plot twist. Grace transcends even law, because grace is love in action, not earned but revealed. Again, some folks say, what about the law? Doesn't everything come through cause and effect? Well, yes, and grace is what softens the landing. Grace is what interrupts the karmic loop. Grace is what makes miracles logical in a universe governed by love. Grace doesn't erase the law. It operates the highest level within it. It's God's way of saying, yeah, I know the math, but I also know your heart. So if law is structure, grace is the flow. If law is the vessel, grace is the wine. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, all I have seen teaches me to trust in the Creator for all that I have not seen. That's grace. Trust in the unknown. Faith is what is unfolding, a willingness to rest in mystery. Have you ever bought a car? You were out looking for them all over the place, and finally you decided on one that maybe you really hadn't noticed before. And you thought, this is my car. But once you start driving it, you notice that every other car on the road is the same, or you're noticing all of them. That's happened to all of us. Well, Grace is the same way. The more you recognize it, the more you realize grace. Not because it wasn't there before, but because you're seeing through different eyes. So let's talk about embodying grace. Let's take it a little bit deeper, because the ultimate goal is not just to notice grace, it is to become it. So let's take a moment, close your eyes, and bring to mind a time when you felt undeservedly loved, undeservedly forgiven, undeservedly held, or undeservedly helped. Okay, now you can open your eyes and realize that was grace. Now breathe into this truth. You can be that grace for someone else. This is how we transcend, not by escaping the world, but by elevating it with our presence. You are here to be grace in motion. You are a divine ambassador of peace, forgiveness, and presence. Because those who recognize grace are the ones who can give it. You extend compassion instead of judgment. You pause instead of react. You lift instead of lecture. Forgive instead of condemn. Offer presence instead of pressure. You forgive faster. You soften your tone. And you let others off the hook because you've let yourself off the hook. That's when you know you're walking the pathway of grace. You know, when someone meets you, do they feel judged or do they feel lifted? Do you bring heat or healing? Do you carry complaint or compassion? To embody grace is to become a safe space in a chaotic world. It is to forgive even when you are right. It is to offer your presence even when you're tired. It is to pause and breathe instead of reacting with fear or anger. This is what it means to be a Christ presence in the earth, according to Emma Curtis Hopkins. Emerson again talks, what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters when compared to what lies within us. And what lies within us is the foundation of grace itself. How do we walk the pathway of grace? Well, first we practice recognition. We consciously acknowledge the blessings, beauty, and divine presence that already surround us. We slow down. We pause our hurried pace. We make space for Spirit to whisper its wisdom into our awareness. We open our eyes. We choose to truly see with eyes of love, awe, and compassion, the sacred unfolding at every moment. And we become present. We anchor ourselves in the now, where grace is always available and life reveals its sacredness. Here are some tools that can help walk the path of grace. Begin each day with this question: where will grace meet me today? When you're frustrated or hurt, breathe and say, grace is here now. At night, ask, where did grace show up today? Or where could I have offered more? In moments of doubt, remember, grace is not a sign of perfection. Grace is the soil in which our perfection becomes. In moments of doubt, again, remember that. It's so important. Trust to move your feet. Know the truth in your prayer. And live as though it were true already. When it comes in the form of a gift, a healing, or a moment of peace, or even as a woman named Grace, the sacred presence is always near. Grace is not far off. Grace is right here. Look for it, name it, and love it. And now I invite you into a moment of sacred knowing as we do a spiritual mind treatment. Sit back, take a breath, and let's just know that there is one infinite presence, one radiant source, one living grace that fills all space and time. It is the heart of creation, the stillness within every storm, the light behind every eye. This grace is not separate from me. It is my breath, my being, and my truth. I recognize that I am not here to earn love. I am here to express it. I am not broken. I am beloved. I see grace in my challenges, my lessons, and in my joy. I see grace in the ordinary and the awe-inspiring. And I declare, I am a channel of grace. I forgive freely. I live fully. I love fiercely, and I walk gently. Grace leads me. Grace lifts me. Grace lives in me. I give thanks for this sacred awareness. I release these words in the perfect law of mind, knowing that grace is already making the way for me. And so it is. Namaste.